What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of the AJ and Arcade Build It podcast. We're so excited to have y'all here. If y'all checked out our first episode, we took time to introduce who we were. Today, we're about to get into it. We're gonna have some real conversation that we want y'all to engage in. We want y'all to reach out to us, comment, send us messages. We look forward to hearing from you, but it takes you to have this conversation with us. So we look forward to hearing from y'all. Let's get it, man.
And I just want to say thank you to everybody that reached out, gave positive vibes about what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish here. And yeah, just keep sending any sort of videos you want us to watch or anything like that. We may not hit them on the next episode if you guys give us information or questions and stuff like that. We do have some ideas for our first few episodes, so we'll eventually get to it. And we're going to try to keep the videos a little bit shorter, probably more 30 to 45 minutes instead of a little over an hour. So hopefully everybody will watch the whole video. And but yeah, keep reaching out with any information you guys have for us.
Definitely.
So, topic covered at the end of the last episode, going into white privilege. I'll let you kind of lead it off. I feel like you.
Let me ask you a question.
You already had some
when
ideas.
You hear the word white privilege. How does that make you feel?
It's difficult. I feel like I'm not a good representative for white people when it comes to for the offended white people about white privilege, because maybe before, I felt maybe more slightly offended by it, but I mean, I recognizes the differences that I have in my life because I'm white, and I have no problem with that. I think what I would assume the biggest reason why people take offense to it is because it automatically feels like they're being undercut for the work that they've done in their life. Like everything came easy because you're white.
Yeah.
So
do you think people look at it kind of like a racist term, like, you know what I'm saying, kind of like a derogatory term, like white privilege, and they look at it from the derogatory side that causes them to take offense sometimes?
Yeah, I think that's more times than not how people probably take it. And I think it's just like with so many things, your tone and how you say it can definitely change the way somebody receives that information. And I think when stuff like this is going on with all the protesting and all that stuff, it's unfortunate that it makes terms like that seem like they're coming from a derogatory place. Which and I'm sure some people do mean it in a derogatory way. I personally don't take it that way, because I can see past the fact that just because I'm white doesn't mean everything is easy, doesn't mean I get handed everything, but I fully recognize so many times in my life that if I was a black man, situations would have went differently.
Yeah.
And I think it would be ignorant to not have that perspective.
And that's awesome. If we could have an objective or a goal for this episode, is if we could like disarm, because that's what it's like that white privilege. And you're right. So many people have used it to mean like used it derogatory. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Use it as a knock. And then even people have used it, from white people have used it, and they do weird stuff like, I'm going to wash their feet, I'm going to do this, I'm going to bow down. And I'm like, no one's asking anyone to do that. So if we could disarm that term white privilege and honestly look at what it means, because it's not, it's for real, when it's used, it's not taking away from the fact that you do have to work hard for everything that you have. That struggle is real in your life. You did have to struggle. So it's not saying that whatsoever, but it's recognizing that like we talked about racism last week, racism is ingrained into the very fabric of what we call America. And because of that, because of things that were taken, steps that were taken by forefathers, because of laws that were made by ancestors, whether on the right side, the wrong side, they have, tilted the scale so much more to one side, the white side predominantly, than it has people of color. And like you and I talk about, that's an issue. And how do we address that issue?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Is it's hard, and I think this was one thing that I was thinking about this week, just on the overall idea of everything that's going on and the idea of trying to breed um, an actual amount of equality.
Yeah.
Is it's not only is it a complex issue that a lot of people want to throw simplistic ideas at how to fix it, but on top of that, we are such a diverse country, not just in ethnicities and stuff like that, but in also just how different areas are different. So
Yeah.
it's hard to have ideas on how to fix things for our country when the idea of how to change the culture in Seattle might be different than how to change the culture in Jacksonville, Florida, or in New
Yeah.
York, or in LA.
Yeah.
And of course, there's going to be broad ideas that can work anywhere, but I think there's also a lot of other ideas that need to be um, more on a local basis than
Definitely.
a nationwide basis.
Yeah, and you're right. There's definitely conversations that that have to be had in the community. There's conversation like it's coming to such a hedge that it's like, where do we start? You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Because you have people doing so many different things, and like you said, what works in Seattle may not work for us here in Alabama. You know what I'm saying? So it's like in the military, we got these things we call spaces and faces, and depending on what level of leadership you're on, you either concentrate on the face, that's the one that's hands on in the problem, and then if you're at a higher echelon of leadership, you concentrate on the space or the overarching mission. But they're both needed. You know what I'm saying? Because if I'm hands on, and if I don't have the right tools or the right people in place, then I'm not going to see any change, to the issue. And then if I'm at a higher level, if I'm talking about government and city and stuff, and I don't have the right policies or the funding, then there's not going to be any gains made either. So when we talk about white privilege, it is honestly understanding understanding that simply because of race, and that's crazy. The crazy thing about America is something as minute and as small and finite as race has been used to divide such a great country. You know what I'm saying? America has amassed to one of the greatest countries in the world, and we can't say, oh no, white people did this, oh no, black people did this. The reason we had is because so many people came together from so many different backgrounds, and we had made a lot of our initial wealth, that initial investment for over 200 years has been on the backs of free labor also. But a country this great to be reduced to something as ignorant as race is absolutely crazy. But the reason we got here, and the reason we use the terms as white privilege, is because I would say it's institutional ignorance. I would say it's forced education. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Controlling the narrative, and if you're able to control the narrative, you can kind of play puppet master with your those that are subordinate to you. So it's kept the wealth in America, but it's kept the wealth in an extremely small pot, and it kept the other 95%. You know what I'm saying? Head to head at each other as something as simple as race. So getting into it, when we talk about white privilege, what I talk about when I mean white privilege, I mean when I say the fabric of the every single thing in America, it has been built off of racism. I'm talking about the education system. I'm talking about housing. I'm talking about where we place people. Um, the financial status, poverty. I'm talking about the criminal justice system. It's so much that racism affects that you as a white male, and I'm like I said, it's not negative. You as a white male, you're not going to be. You're going to give.
You cut out on that last part. You're good.
Yeah, just because, yeah. So as a white male, you're going to be given the benefit of the doubt just because of the color of your skin. And like we talked about last week, that's not necessarily wrong, but I'm not even going to say not necessarily. It's not wrong whatsoever, but it should be extended to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody should get that benefit of the doubt. So when we say things like, okay, so we talked about how you grew up last episode. What kind of school did you go to?
I went to a public school, but it was rural. It was rural, so I feel like it was a good school.
Yeah.
Really, this is no slight on the school I graduated high school from, but when I had only 30 people in my grade before I moved in high school, that was probably the best education I feel like I could have gotten. The
Mm-hmm.
level of learning that was expected of me, and the hands-on nature in which you're being taught, I feel I don't think there could have been a better environment.
Yeah. And And so if I could be like president for a day, if AJ had this all encompassing ability to change the systems in America, and then like I said, I'm still on the topic of white privilege, but I think most of it starts in the education system. Um, when we see things like housing and we see redlining, you've been to my house in Georgia. I had a beautiful house that I loved. It was my first house that I bought. But when I got with my realtor, I had to fire my first realtor because they were only showing us properties that were in predominantly black communities. And you know how Valdosta was. The school system in this city was not good. Being a military person infused into this environment, I wanted my kids to go to the best schools. So I had to search for schools outside of the communities that they were trying to put. Even though my finances dictated that I could afford more and could afford different neighborhoods, my first realtor wasn't showing me those. And that has been a problem in America, to where you see things like zoning. And yes, there are so many black children, African American children, that have access to great schools, but the majority of them that are in inner city schools are not properly funded. The student to teacher ratio is off the chart. A lot of the times, the teachers are more concentrated on discipline than they are teaching. So you and I were talking about earlier. This was disparities. You know what I'm saying, in the education system, that only the gap only grows larger and larger as these children get older.
Yeah.
Now, and we said it's not the fact that white people don't suffer, that white people aren't poor. A study has shown that even in the education system, poor white Americans have more access to diverse, segregated, affluent schools than those of African American children. Um, if you're grow up in poverty as an African American child, you're 19 times more likely to go to an underfunded and an inner city school than you are if you're poor and you're of the white race. Those are some of the disparities and the differences that we're talking about. That's white privilege. It's not saying, and like I said, it's not a bad thing. It is something that we need to have a conversation about, and we need to expose, and we need to try to figure out how do we fix this.
And the thing too is it's not a personal attack on people.
Yeah,
it's an idea of a problem that exists. It's not a
Yeah.
personal. When you say white privilege, it's not a person. You're not singling me out, saying you're white, you got a
Yeah.
good life.
Yeah.
It's not you're white, you have a good life, and you should be pulled down to the problems that exist in my life. It's let's pull everybody up to the privileges that a majority of white people get.
Yeah. Yep. And then in a video you sent, and we'll put the link in the comments. But John McWhorter, he did a video talking about, he was kind of debunking the idea of come on, help me out, anti-racism.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about anti-racism last week, and I kind of got what he was saying, but the issue I had with what he was saying was he tried to use statistics to show that anti-racism hindered the advances to eradicating racism. The reason I get what he's saying is because, yes, in an anti-racist movement, you can hide any movement for that matter. I believe the majority of movements start out with a good intent, but the moment it catches momentum, it gets hijacked and usually turned into something it's not. We can look at all the movements and then how they started, and then look at where they're at, 10 years, 15, 20 years later, and you're like, how did it even, that's not even the initial reason. So yes, so the anti-racist movement has been out for a while. And I think what he's saying is, if you concentrate on certain things and overlook other aspects, then you won't make any gains. And one thing he did was every single person of color that was murdered by the police, he brought up an identical issue of a white person that died almost the same way. So my issue with that is both of them were wrong, weren't they? And I get it. I get media bias. We know and understand the media is biased. We know and understand agendas will be pushed. But what you cannot do is, you cannot overlook the fact that policing among African Americans is greatly different, and police brutality is at a greatly disproportionate race than it is with white Americans. One of the privileges of white privilege is having the benefit of the doubt when you encounter a cop. When you encounter the cop, and that should be everybody. And I understand what they do is extremely dangerous. You and I signed an oath that said that at one point, if it came down to it, we said we're willing to give our life in defense of this nation. And I have been downrange multiple times, and then I have had brothers that I lost that it was a very bad day, but they understood what they signed up for. And I'm not saying cops have to understand what they sign up for. We would see, if that bias was not there, I think we would see the number of unarmed citizens dying at the hands of police greatly diminish, greatly go down, if we have the ability to tear this down and give everybody like an American type privilege, a human type privilege. Everybody has that privilege, but right there, right now, it's only dedicated to one race for whatever reason.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think using innocent white people dying in the hands of police officers as a defense for making it seem like, oh, well, it's not that bad that black people are also dying when they're in an innocent scenario. Like, that's just two wrongs. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
That further magnifies the situation that not only are police in a very difficult situation, even more now because of how much publicity everything is getting, which is good, because if for the cops that are doing the wrong things, they should get spotlighted. Because then the cops that have the potential to do the wrong things, maybe that will steer them away. But to me, it just raises the idea that there needs to be something to fix this situation.
Yeah, and so like I said, if I had my way, I wrote an expose. I wrote a piece maybe a year ago. I did a study a few years ago that with me, it all starts with education. If you give me, and I'll be honest, my study was how do I turn the Black communities around. So I said, if you give me a 4 to 5 year old African American child and allow me to teach them growing up, teach them all the way until they're seniors in high school. But what I would do is I would honestly teach them their true history, because mentally it does a thing to you if you can't trace your background, you don't know where you come from. When they tell reports of the country, the continent you come from, when they say you come from Africa, and but all they show is impoverished children with flies on their face, feed a child, all the commercials we see. They don't show the beauty that's in that continent. They don't show the beauty that's in the countries, in the people. They don't show the cities that are built up. They don't tell you about the kingdom of Benin, the kingdom of Ethiopia, the Mali Empire, all of these great African empires before, you know what I'm saying, the American empire, before the Western country. They don't show these, and they show you just came from slavery. That's all they show. Uh, it creates a mentality, a stigma that, man, I'll never amass anything, or this is as good as it gets. So if I have the ability to tell young Black children of, no, this is where you come from. No, this is the people. No, these are, even though we were enslaved, these are people that revolted. These are people that rose up. These are people that stood on the side fighting for justice, fighting for equality. The only African Americans we learn of in history is Rosa Parks, MLK. Some people will hear about Malcolm X, but the majority we will not hear about. We won't hear about it, and it creates this vacuum. And when I was doing the study, it didn't only work for Black children, but if white children learned about the true history in America. And our history is very ugly. Our history is very brutal. We can look at different empires, the Mayans, the Incas, and look at the brutality that happened in theirs, but we can't look at it in America. But if we learn the true history in America, then that unbiased racism, where people look at a person of color and they're automatically afraid, that wouldn't be there, because they would know the true history. They would know what went through. So it starts with education, and it starts with education all the way up. But to get to a place to where we're able to educate, I listened to a podcast by Sean King, and I know people are going to have issues when I say that name, but I researched the information he was presenting, and it came from the perspective of defunding the police. And I don't like the word defunding, because people automatically cut it off. Oh, no police. You know what I'm saying? That's not what it's saying. It's saying the police kind of follow the framework that we have in America. America has the military industrial complex. We have the biggest military operating budget, and the next five largest countries don't even spend nowhere near as much as we spend in America. We believe in having the best. We solve a lot of things by dropping bombs. That's what we do, in intimidation. And the police do the same thing. There's some cities in America where the police have an operating budget of over $1 billion. And they have this operating budget of over $1 billion. But when a call came down to it, because like I said, people argument against defunding the police, they're like, oh, well, violent crimes and all of this stuff, and you won't have any police. The truth is, violent crimes account to 4% of what the police did. 4%, $1 billion budget, 4% of what the police did. So, and those extremely violent crimes, when you talk about homicide, rape, things of that nature, that's 1% or oftentimes less than 1%. So 99% of the calls going out to police have nothing to do with the majority of fears in America. But we're taking all this money and throwing it at a police force, to where this money, if this money was distributed among the community, to where you're working on education, you're working on reducing the poverty and eliminating the poverty. If you do those things, if you work on education, the crime rates in your city will go down. the poverty in your city will go down. Matter of fact, your economy will grow because markets will look at their employability. If I bring a company here, am I able to hire employees from this demographic? So when we're talking about these things, when we're talking about the problems that white privilege has caused, it's not only a black issue or brown issue, it's also spilling over into every single community. There's so many advantages from addressing this and addressing it head on also.
Yeah. I think for the police issue part, I was watching a podcast, and this ex Navy SEAL was talking about it, and I think when it comes to police, it's the same thing. It's still an education issue.
Yeah.
He gave his explanation for the problem made sense to me, in that you're asking somebody that actually trains after the police academy, trains maybe 1 or 2 hours, most likely a month. I don't know if it's actually that, but trains for 1 to 2 hours a month to react to a certain situation.
Yep.
Like you can't expect somebody, you can't expect all these people to be, they are a professional, but I don't think they're being equipped to handle things professionally.
Exactly. Yeah.
In situations.
Yep.
And his how he explained it was, he said when he was a Navy SEAL, they spent 18 months training for a 6-month deployment. 18 months day in and day out training for a 6-month deployment.
Yep. Yeah. And when he did it, he knew exactly what he would, and that's one thing also. How do you respond to, you know what I'm saying, an infant not getting enough oxygen on one call, and then you turn around and got to flip the switch and go to a domestic violence situation where weapons are reported. You know, so if we were truly to look at this, because I don't know how you're going to remove that stigma. I don't know how you're going to remove that bias that each and every one of us has. Like I know you're like, you know what I'm saying? So you may not have the bias some people have, but I'm going to naturally have, if I have a bias every time I see red and blue lights coming in my rear view mirror, then the way I approach that situation as a citizen, I may be on edge. I may be short tempered. I may have an attitude when I talk. I may be upset and angry. I may be afraid. You know what I'm saying? You never know how someone is going to approach that situation. But as a police officer, it is your job. Like you said, if you train properly, it is your job to approach that situation and for you to be in charge of that situation 100% of the time. The reason we see people die is because they lost control at some point in time. They lost control because they didn't use the right de-escalation tactics. They didn't. The sad part about it is a lot of them don't control their emotions. You know what I'm saying? And they start getting aggravated and they start getting frustrated, and you're challenging my authority. But like you said, there's so much there that you can't fix it. You and I've been in training. We know that, like, if I only train an hour or two a month, then I'm probably not going to take that training seriously anyways. If my job is not training for that scenario, I'm not going to take it seriously. If it's a computer training that I got to do, I'm going to click through it. If it's another training I got to do, I'm going to laugh and joke as I'm doing it, but I'm not taking it seriously. And then when I come up to that rare situation, I'm not going to be prepared. So we really need to look at these type of things. We really need to look at, are we doing the most effective things with our police force? Should the same person that is responding to that infant that's having a lack of air be the same type of person that responds to a situation where guns are involved? I don't think it should be. I think we have the ability to where a force can, you know what I'm saying, they can respond to the 96% of calls that are not dangerous or violent in nature whatsoever. And then, like you said, those ones whose job is just to train day in, day out, they're the ones that respond to the situations that do put their lives at risk. Um, and and so I guess getting back to the white privilege, um, when it comes to policing, do you have any ideas? What are some things you would imagine? It wouldn't even be to tip the scale. It's just making it fair across the board for everybody.
I think that's the hardest part, really, with all of this, is it's so easy to identify a lot of these problems, but then the fix action is much more difficult because, they've already done things for college and stuff like that to try to increase diversity, and I'm not necessarily against those things, but are those things working?
Yeah.
That's the other thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
We also need to address areas where we feel like we're already trying to put a better foot forward in increasing the availability for education and housing and stuff like that for Black people, and say, are these things actually working?
Yeah. You're right, because a lot of things are actually detrimental, and a lot of things were done on purpose to be detrimental. I don't think the reason you and I could come up with a million ideas. I'm sorry about this right here.
You're good.
You and I could come up with a million ideas, but I don't think we're going to see it fixed unless we continue to demand a fix. Because the ones that are over the systems, they're doing exactly what they were designed to do.
Yeah.
They're doing exactly the prison industrial complex is it's a 60 they made what, $6 billion last year. It's a prisons are for profit. So people get kickbacks and get money when they put people in prison, and that labor is used. It's for profit. So we can come up with all these scenarios, but if those that are in power don't want to change it because it's lining their pockets, we won't see anything change. We won't see anything change at all. And like I said, because a lot of times you can't remove that unbiased, and we do say there's a lack of training in the police department. There's a lack of training and a lack of accountability. When they understand, like I said, the job you and I do, we understand that there's an accountability. If one day we're not on our A game and someone dies, what you and I do, if someone dies, we're going to jail. You know what I'm saying? If we were at fault, we're the ones going to jail. We're the ones dealing with that. But when there's no accountability, or when you're sent to police yourself, then you're going to be biased, and you're going to lean in the favor of the person that works for you, or the person that carries the same badge for you. So one thing with me is like I said, I truly believe that, and of course it would be phases, because this is America. America's not like any other country. We have over 360 million firearms on the street, in the streets in America. It's absolutely crazy. Everybody has a gun. I'm not against guns. I have guns in my closet. You know what I'm saying? So the way we approach this may be different than other countries, but those 96% of calls that are nonviolent, I don't think you need a show of force response. I don't think you need an officer that has a taser, a gun, mace. Your first response is to put people in handcuffs and put them on the ground and put them in, rough them up, put them in the back of, because like I said, you're already coming to a tense situation. It takes education, wisdom, and an ability to de-escalate situations sometimes. Because like I said, the majority of times you're responding to a non-violent, a non-threatening situation.
I think one counterpoint to that would be, I understand the show of force idea behind that, but I think also community relations with the police is important. So being able to interact with police officers on a level that's not, oh, it's a guy with a gun showing up because I just messed up.
Yeah.
I think that side argues more for still having police with guns and stuff like that showing up to non-violent situations, because then you're able to interact with them on a different level than they're showing up because you're getting arrested or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And like, my biggest idea for all of this is obviously the most simplistic answer, which is also a difficult answer, is loving everyone.
Yeah.
It changes things.
Yeah.
And it sucks that there's police officers out there that want to cause harm to people, and I know that there's also really good police officers because I saw the work that my dad and many of his coworkers did. But and I think that's the hardest thing in these times is everybody wants to go on the defensive or the attack mode. And I'm not saying some of it isn't justified, but is it causing harm or is it helping?
Yeah.
I think if it's causing harm, then people's pride is getting in the way of actually wanting to fix a situation that is wrong.
Yeah. Yep. And there are studies out there. There are ways to do it. Like all of my interactions with the police, I'm not saying I had all negative interactions. All of my interactions with the police, they had me on the edge because I was doing something wrong, but not like I was breaking the law, but not like doing anything crazy. Everybody, I was taught you can go over 5 miles over the speed limit and you're not speeding. You know, so most of my interactions with the cops are getting pulled over. So if your interactions with the cops are always going to cost you money, you're going to possibly end up in jail, something crazy, then your stigma of the police is going to be a lot different. And like you said, those community relations aren't there. Did you ever get a ticket when you were in Japan?
Yes.
How did it look? Was it an officer behind you that wrote you a ticket?
It wasn't a speeding ticket. I actually bumped into the back of another car, and it was the biggest headache because obviously they don't really speak English. It was off base.
Yeah.
I only spoke English because I was too ignorant to take any Japanese classes. I'm willing to admit that and say that it was ignorant for me to not do that. So then security forces from on base had to have somebody that could translate for us. And yeah, it was always a scary situation because especially there's outside of our country in a lot of places, there's a bad stigma when it comes to U.S. military. So anytime I was somewhere where the Japanese police were showing up, I always felt like they're going to look at me like I'm doing something wrong or I'm a bad person.
Yeah. Yeah, you were in Okinawa with the Marines, so.
Yeah, and we had protesting at my last year there. We had protesting at our outside our gate every Monday and Friday.
Yeah. So, in mainland Japan, the crazy part is I could be speeding from downtown Tokyo to my house, and I would never see a cop think I made amazing time. Like, oh yeah, I did that in 2 hours. Think I made amazing time, and then like a month later, 7 tickets show up. You know what I'm saying? Like $200 to $300 each.
Oh,
you know.
Yeah.
So they got their money. Because they had, different traffic enforcement measures and stuff like that. But it was very effective, and I never had to interact with the police on that level. If we remove things like that, if we remove those negative interactions with the police, and we had people that were actually trained to deal with these situations, like dealing with a domestic dispute, you're going to deal with it so often. That's got to be one of the top calls that they receive. It's just because the proximity of two humans trying to interact and be one. It's you always have these disparities. I don't think it takes, you know what I'm saying, guns coming into the home. It actually takes someone that is trained, that understands the situation, that understands the hostilities that are going on, that has the ability. Because the thing is, when the cops show up to a domestic dispute call, they will separate the people for 24 hours if one of them is not going to jail, and then that woman or that man is back in danger 24 hours later. That honestly takes somebody coming in, being able to honestly assess the situation and put that couple on track to amends, or at least to where the wife, the children, the husband, they're all safer. And that takes training that police oftentimes don't get. And the ones that do are good at it have the mentality, I think, like you said, that love everybody, that actually care, that are concerned. How can I help? I can relate to this. I can understand this. So there's ways to do it, but collectively we have to want to do it.
Yeah.
Collectively, we have to understand and admit, no, there is an issue. Back to one of the things we said, it's just as bad when a white person dies from having a knee on their neck by police officers as it is when a black person dies. And yes, the media is going to, and the media had to highlight this because oftentimes the problem is in the black community, it goes unpunished. It goes unpunished, man. Like if we think it's bad now, man, let this George Floyd verdict come back not guilty. Let this Ahmaud Arbery verdict come back not guilty. And I'm saying what we just went through is gonna fail in comparison to it. There has not been, the reason it's been highlighted is because there has not been the proper attention, and people have not been held accountable. But like you and I said, it's wrong if an innocent civilian, an unarmed person, dies at the hands of the police. Period. You know what I'm saying? We're not even arguing talking about the person was shooting at the police, or you know what I'm saying. He's notorious for being dangerous. We're talking about civilians. We're talking about mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, you know what I'm saying, that had left thinking they were going to come home that day. And they died at the hands of a police officer that was so quick to shoot. I've watched, preparing for this, I watched video after video after video where the majority of the times it's the police officer escalating the situation.
And I think that's the hardest thing to figure out. How do we get to a place where the community relations between the civilians and police officers don't put police officers in a place where they have to feel so defensive, and then and then with the idea that we are giving police officers the best training possible and selecting the best candidates possible, so anyone that has to interact with a police officer feels like their safety and the safety of others is the number one concern.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I think there's no justification for innocent people dying. Zero justification for innocent people dying. But I feel there is the ignored side of the fact that the more hostility is bred towards police officers, the more uncomfortable police officers are going to be in situations. And that's not going to help anything. That is zero defense for them to kill or injure an innocent person. But that to me, that's also a reality.
Yeah, I think we see the hostility die down when we honestly see change, and we see laws, and we see accountability. Like, yeah, I get it, you're taking a knee, but that does nothing. You know what I'm saying? Address the issue. I get, yeah, you're changing a couple names, or you're calling this out, or nothing like that. Address the issue. You know what I'm saying? We can't overlook the issue. We can't continue to overlook the issue. And like you said, I'm okay. I'm okay with better pay. You know what I'm saying, for police officers. I'm okay with police officers not having to work a security job to help. You know what I'm saying? Take care of their family. Or them not having to work 12 hours with overtime. You know what I'm saying? And now they have an adverse family situation at home. So now 24/7. They're on edge. I'm okay with, like, there's not a hatred for the police. You know what I'm saying? Just unfair policing, just institutional biases, just And for everyone that's going to come to this conversation, like I don't know how many times I've seen it. Well, if criminals stop breaking the law, then then the police wouldn't have to take lives. Okay, that's not what we're talking about right here. We're not talking about that. We're talking about these organic, these everyday encounters, these encounters that are 96% of their calls that are being escalated to someone losing their life.
It's just like the All Lives Matter. We're not talking about that. We're talking about how Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there are so many issues. There are so many issues, and we will try to address a lot of them.
And we're going to have that conversation later, because yes, there is a conversation that we do have to have for the impoverished communities. But the thing is, what we're talking about today is how did they get there? They got there because institutional racism. They got there because this country was built on the premises that one race was better than the other, and it was just carried on into all aspects of society.
And
go ahead.
To wrap this back to the idea of white privilege, it's easy for me to say a lot of these things because being white, I really don't have that concern.
Yeah.
I don't have the concern that when I'm pulled over by a police officer or I interact with a police officer, that their first assumption is I'm guilty and that they need to be on edge because I might try to harm them.
Yeah.
I don't have that feeling. So it's easy for me to spit a lot of these ideas, and I understand that. But I feel like trying to stay level-headed about it is we want to build for a better future, not react to a bad past. And I understand we have to use the past to create a judgment for how we need to go into the future. But I don't want to, and that's part of the problem right now, and why I feel like so much things haven't changed is because everybody wants to be reactionary rather than use the ideas of what we have already encountered and how can we actually make a better future.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what the idea of building comes of. If we could paint a picture for y'all what we wanted to do, I was building a bridge going back to the past, a brick, you know what I'm saying, stacking brick upon brick, and taking that thing apart. And my boy Ryan was he was laying the rebar and the steel and the ideas of how we get past this. But you have to be willing to listen and understand. And because when I say this country, I'm not just saying this country it was based on racism. I study so much history. What I do in my biblical degree, the things I study has so much to do with. You can see how it was built up, but we see every single aspect in America. It seems like it has been built to uplift one race. When we sit there and think that a Middle Eastern, a poor man from the Middle East, a carpenter's son who was in the sun all day long, has the blonde hair and blue eyes, then there's an issue. I've been to the Middle East. I've spent 3 years in the Middle East. And I used to feel bad for my white friends because they stuck out like a sore thumb. I'm like, oh, dang, you better watch out because you stand out here. But in our religions and in every single thing we do, if you think that the standard, the standard that has been made up has been white, and I will say this, human nature is always going to lean towards taking care of my own. But the
and leaning towards what looks and talks like I do.
Yeah. But what we're saying is what hinders that is you having that mentality or having that mindset. It doesn't just stay there. The violence doesn't just stay in one community. The drugs don't just stay in one community. Even when we look at inner cities, when we see what's going on, the CIA actually had a program to where they would direct drugs to certain neighborhoods. That's why we see the neighborhoods in peril. Like a lot of young black children, if your only role model is the person that has money, is a drug dealer, or they rap, or they ended up making it playing basketball or football, and those are your only ways of getting out, man, you have less than 1% chance, less than a 0.5% chance to make it to college, let alone the NBA or the NFL. And then if you go the drug route, you're going to end up dead, or you're going to end in jail. You know what I'm saying? So if those are our role models, but like I said, the government actually routed drugs into these neighborhoods, and the white people that partook just happened to be casualties of war. And we've seen the war on drugs greatly affect and diminish the wealth that was in the black community. The wealth gap in the 50s was closer between black families and white families than it is now. But the war on drugs that took place in the 80s and the 90s, it specifically targeted certain communities. And we have the same issues, and that's what we're telling you. You got to address it, and you have to stop being getting so offended and so sensitive that you can't look and see that there's this white privilege, because it's spilling over into your communities. We called it a war on drugs now we call it an opioid pandemic. And now, these people need help, and we got to get them the help, and we got to get them this. But 30 years ago, we were throwing everybody in jail. We were tearing families apart. We were destroying families. And we see that, and like I said, it's in every single aspect of society. And I will address it. I will bring it up. But the goal is to build a bridge to how do we get better as a society.
Because it's just about lifting people up.
Yeah.
That's why you shouldn't feel attacked, or like it's you're being singled out or something like that. Nobody's trying to drag anybody down. We're trying to lift everybody up to the same standard.
Yep. And what I say, the majority of what I say, it's not an attack on you. You didn't do it.
Yeah.
Why get defensive? Why get defensive about it? You know what I'm saying? So yeah. I'm interested to see what the comments for this week will be.
Yeah. Back to what you asked me earlier. The answer, I feel like the first answer has to be education on a childhood level.
Yeah.
Because that was what we were talking about before we started recording this episode, was doing stuff like increasing diversity in universities and colleges and stuff like that is great. But if those kids aren't prepared to succeed in those scenarios, then there's no point in giving a kid an opportunity that he is not prepared to succeed in. If you know more than likely he's going to fail in that situation, well, how do we build him up so when we can give him this situation, he has a high likelihood of succeeding?
Yeah.
And so to me, it starts at a childhood education level. And I really don't know how well it would work, but one of my friends brought up a good idea, I thought, was pushing more money towards teachers and incentivizing them in low-income areas in cities and stuff like that, those low-income schools and all that stuff, incentivizing the teachers to be there. And then you not only to be there, but then also the progress that they help these kids have.
Yeah. So I had a motto. My motto required classroom size being smaller, so it requires more teachers. Teachers having better pay, and like you said, remove the incentive wasn't for the teacher, but a key component was the parents being involved in the child's education. And then they said, AJ, how are you going to get parents involved in the child's education? Every year around tax time, if you have kids, people are putting in for the earned income child tax credit. But to qualify for this credit, you have to be involved in your child's education. You have to attend the PTA meetings. And like you said, I'm with you. It 100% starts with education. We see these academies. Man, I love LeBron James because of what he's doing. We see so many of these academies popping up to where those students, there's an academy in Atlanta where it has 100% college acceptance rate. 100% of the students get accepted to college, and they're oftentimes getting full rides or scholarships to go to this college. So we know it can be done, and it does start with education at the young level. I think it's two parts. We'll have the education with the children, because that's what's going to change the future, and we're going to have the conversation with adults that didn't have that education to continue to make strides, the slow strides, the baby steps to change this thing. But then we'll see the next generation taking running with it.
And then also, obviously, everybody doesn't need to go to college. I don't have a college education.
Yeah.
But then people have hit a higher level of learning by the time they're graduating high school.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have people that are 18, 19 years old that are more capable if they choose to not go to college or to a university.
Yeah.
And the standard should be getting them to the point where they're choosing whether or not they want to go to college. Yeah. Not them figuring out that they don't have the education requirements to make it to college.
Yeah.
And I understand that there's still going to be some people that fall short because you can only do so much. People still have to put in a certain amount of the work themselves. But we're not at the point where everybody is getting the opportunities at an early age to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what diversity is, where everyone has those equal opportunities. And like you said, people are going to squander them, and like that's a different conversation we will have. We will have the conversation, because I have that conversation on a daily basis of, okay, well, how do I change this community? How do I change my community? How do I address certain things? And it spills over into all aspects. But like you said, if from the spaces, from the top echelon, if we can give everybody that same opportunity, then I think we're better off for it.
Yeah. So I think we've probably been going about an hour now, maybe a little over an hour. So 30 to 45 minutes for this episode didn't work, but it's all good. It's more about having the conversation than sticking to a certain time frame or something like that. But I'll just speak for me wrapping up, and then you can say something yourself. I think the idea of white privilege, I believe, completely exists. I understand that there's some people out there that don't want to acknowledge it or don't believe it, and to each their own. But for those people that do identify that there is white privilege, just understand it's not an attack on you. Just recognize not just the luxuries you have, but the opportunities, because not all of it is just stuff that's given. It's just a door that is presented to you that you still have to walk through. And recognize those things and try to figure out ways that you can help those around you have those same doors for them.
Man, I love it. Yeah, and like I said, from my community, from my side, you will see a lot of people that are angry, but do me a favor and try to understand the anger. Do me a favor and try to understand the frustration, understand the years of inequality, the years of indifference, the years of not getting the benefit of the doubt, the years of being fighting hard to be, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I was told I had to be better. I had to be twice as better at something just to be considered equal. And that's when you see a success in our community, I guarantee that's a conversation a lot of people that look like me have had to have had with their parents. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes you could be twice as good and still get knocked down just as hard. So So the anger isn't necessary. The anger definitely isn't personal unless you say something crazy. You're probably going to see people coming at you crazy. But the anger and the frustration is justified. It doesn't come from a place that is void. It comes from a place of years, decades, and generations of being overlooked and being oppressed. So honestly, try to understand what life is like from someone else's perspective.
Real quick, I was just thinking about this. I think it was yesterday, so it goes along with what you were just saying. I think when you're trying to improve yourself, obviously you have to be very self-reflective. When you're trying to help improve a group, a community, or a country, before you're self-reflective, you first have to put yourself in their shoes. Think about what they're experiencing, and then be self-reflective. Because if you're just immediately self-reflective, like, well, what have I experienced? Okay, well, I haven't experienced those things, so what can I really do to help? Or everything's fine because I haven't had to experience those things. If I first think, all right, what are the experiences that Adrian's gone through in his life? What are some bad interactions that he's had with people? What are some good interactions that he's had with people? Okay, now what has my interaction been with black people? What has my interaction been with white people since I'm white? Now how can we make both of those things level out?
Man, I love it. That's an awesome way to look at it. And that's a perfect way. I think that's the perfect place to wrap it up. What do you think?
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. So yeah, man, this conversation has been great. Again, I know my boy RK is going to give a disclaimer, but I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy seeing the comments. I enjoy y'all reaching out. Y'all post what your thoughts in the comment section. Y'all reach out to us. I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody reach out. Any whether it's just information you want to pass along, whether it's videos or articles you want us to read that you want us to talk about, or it's just personal questions. If you want, I'm more than willing to have one-on-one conversations, or if it's a question you want AJ and I to address on the podcast, any of that stuff, reach out to us personally, or throw some comments in the video. Obviously, we're still only speaking on our experiences, and we're just representing ourselves, and we're just fighting for everybody to have the best life. So hopefully nobody takes offense, and anybody that does, hopefully, I don't know. People always be offended, but and just because you disagree with us doesn't mean you have to be offended by us either. We're not trying to offend. We're just trying to throw some perspective. I would say we're not even trying to educate. We're just trying to give our perspective on issues, and that's it.
Definitely.
But all right, y'all have a good one. Thanks for watching.